Hello, this is Max Stella reporting from beautiful Marathon Electric in Wausau, Wisconsin, headquarters of Marathon Electric Manufacturing. Today we are going to discuss a topic called motor mods, motor modifications. Our mod center has various motors in stock, hundreds of motors in stock and parts, and this is a powerful tool to serve our customer and their customers' needs when we have a situation where the quantities of the request are small, 20 pieces or less is usually the number, and the motor that's really needed is very, very close to a stock motor, but it needs some slight modification. That slight modification can be done in two different ways, one in the mod center, one in the field, and the beauty of the mod center is if we can do the modification, the customer can get shipped the exact motor he wants, she wants, in days rather than waiting weeks for us to build the motor exactly the way they want it. The mod center is located in Indianapolis, Indiana. It just so happens to be in the same facility where the largest motor distribution center in the industry is located in Indianapolis, Indiana, Marathon Electric's situation. And we have a lot of these motors in stock in that facility and a lot of accessory parts in stock to make these mods. We have skilled technicians on site that can do the mod, so you know that there's not an issue with warranty or something like that. Now, like I said, it's normally a small quantity that's required, or sometimes a very short lead time, or sometimes just a electrical rerate of the motor that's very close to what we want, but not exactly. When we do these mods, we usually, almost always, replate the motor with a R as in Robert number on the model number, so that in the future, if the motor has to be serviced or replaced, we know that it's not exactly that model number as it was built. There's some modification being done to it. And these R numbers are coded so we have a chance to retrace the PO and find out what it is. Otherwise, we'd send them the wrong motor again. Now, some of the rerate mods we're talking about here today can be done in the field. That would be if the customer had a motor in his inventory or her inventory that was very close to what they needed, but it needed some widget, some accessory to it. So some of the mods come in kit form that can be done in the field. The first one we want to talk about, these are, by the way, this discussion will be the ones that we found that were the most common requested ones based on annual volume. There are, I don't want you to think that this is the only mod, these are the only mods discussed today that we can do. We can do many, many dozens of different kind of mods. So the best thing to do is to call customer service rep and ask them, can this thing be a mod, rather than me waiting 6 weeks for you to build it for me, because I might need it in a hurry. Conduit box mod. There's the conduit box on the side of the motor. Now, if you look at the little picture, you will see that the conduit box, when the motor's facing sideways to us and the shaft is on the right, the conduit box is right in front of you, and the lead exit for the customer's connection is down on the bottom or sometimes on the back. That's the standard. Okay? So sometimes the end user says, well, I have a wall there. I can't have I can't connect it. I need it on the other side, or I need it on the top. Or maybe I'm going to mount the motor on the wall. So now I need the conduit box in a whole different location. The standard location is what we call F1, and this customer requests something that is not F1. So we can do that on the mod. We do the mod, these type of mods, almost exclusively in the mod center. And that would be repositioned. Now, if this motor happened to be drip-proof, and you know what a drip-proof motor is, it has vents that are supposed to be 15 degrees from vertical. So if this happened to be a drip-proof motor, we may have to change the brackets, the end bells, spin things around, and so that's why it should be done by a skilled technician, but it isn't always. And sometimes the customer's end user would request that we put on a cast iron material box rather than a steel box. So that would be another way to do a conduit box mod. As we go through these, the mod number is up at the top of the screen just for your reference. The second type of mod we want to talk about is a brake mod. And that would be to add a brake to a 4-in-1 motor or a Black Max or a Blue Max motor. Okay, and the brake would be used to provide quick stops and holding power for vector applications when you're in a system that is usually run by a VFD. That's done in the mod center. However, there is a kit on certain of our product that we can send to the field that they can hook up. So this is a combination one. This is not only a mod center, but it's also a field assembly kit is possible. Our catalog will tell you what brake size. The mod center will know also is the proper size. And there are the pages of the catalog where the brakes are located. And why would you think that the brake mod would go on a 4-in-1 motor, a Black Max motor, or a Blue Max motor? Why not any motor? The reason is those are the 3 type motors that have a stub shaft to accept the brake. Not every motor can accept the brake. If you need a brake on a standard plain vanilla motor, then we're talking about a buildup. Okay? Encoder mod. We have various different kind of encoders that we can put on these AC drive motors used on VFDs, and they attach to the back of the motor, and of course they give speed feedback to the VFD. They're used in closed loop vector systems. This is a similar one. We can put the encoder on in the mod center. We can ship the encoder kit to the customer if he has the motor. That's why, I think that's why most of the ones we're discussing today are so popular, because they can be done both in the mod and in the field. And that's why they're ordered so much like that. Black Max, Blue Max, XRI Severe Duty, and XRI 841 motors are the ones that accept an encoder, except the XRI type motors, you have to put a stub shaft kit on as well, so that you have something to mount the encoder to. Because the encoder is integral on the shaft of the motor. So if you don't have a stub shaft, then you don't have any place to hook to mount the encoder physically. Another type of mod is a thermostat mod. Add thermostats to the winding. Why? Because we want our stock motor to have thermal protection, and it doesn't as a stock motor. It provides the unwinding protection from thermal issues such as overheating, overcurrent. It's done in the mod center. The reason it's done in the mod center is the motor has to be disassembled, and this has to be done by a skilled technician. You wouldn't be able to do this at most customers' facility because, for one thing, if they take the motor apart, they've actually voided the warranty to begin with. So this is almost exclusively done, not almost, it's exclusively done in the mod center. But it can be done on, it says on the slide, all stock. I would say virtually all stock. Anytime you're talking about motors and you say always or never, you always get yourself in trouble, you know. So virtually all stock can accept a thermostat.
What about explosion-proof?
Explosion-proof motors are a separate item, and it's a good question, and I will get to it. And it can be done, but most explosion-proof motors have them already, but if they don't, they can be added only in the mod center. That's a very good question, and we might as well address it right now. Explosion-proof motors, you know, are used in hazardous locations. They are UL and CSA listed for hazardous locations. They are in an environment that's extremely dangerous. We do not want people in the field messing with an explosion-proof motor because it's got our name on it. So whenever there's an explosion-proof mod, you're talking mod center. Okay? C-face mod. Excellent question. Non-explosion proof. There we go. And that's why I said we'd get to it. Be very, very careful of any mod on an explosion proof. Make sure that it's done properly in the mod center. Here we don't have a C-face motor in stock. The customer wants a C-face on his product, so we can put a C-face on many, many of our stock motors. And it comes, by the way, as a mod center mod, or it comes, in a lot of cases, as a kit. It can be done in the field. If you look in our catalog, and if the catalog's up to date, not all motors will accept a C-face kit, and especially explosion-proof. There'll be a footnote in the far side of the catalog under its description, footnote 25, that specifically says it cannot accept a kit. All right? On the far right side of the motor description in the catalog, it usually gives you the kit number if it will accept the kit. But if you don't see a kit number, and you don't see it, footnote 25, that it absolutely cannot, then ask, because it could be the catalog is only issued once every several years, and motors change by the hour. So it could accept the kit, and it could be done in the mod center. Now, certain motors like 140 frame, 180 frame, I believe, and 280 frame, there are certain motors where when you put the kit on the standard rigid base motors, you end up with a non-standard BA dimension. BA dimension is the distance from the flange to the feet. So sometimes, and those are delineated in the catalog, it says you have a non-standard BA. It's not really a big time issue, except that you should inform the customer that he's going to get a motor that if he built it up, it would be different than he is with a kit, because it's not going to conform exactly. And it's not anything wrong with the design of the motor. It's because NEMA's definition of the BA dimension for certain frame sizes is impossible to do it with a kit. Last one we want to talk about, I think this is the last one, is a renameplate mod. I left this for the end because it's the most fun for me to talk about, but it is probably the most popular mod we have. That is where a motor is in stock. They need a special voltage. They need a special ambient, altitude, something different, special horsepower, different frequency, all kinds of things that the motor is capable of doing. It's just that the mod, the nameplate on the motor as it's in stock doesn't say that, doesn't have those parameters. So this is a very, very common thing. So we changed the nameplate value from what the nameplate actually has because the application requires special or different parameters. Maybe 50 ambient instead of 40, maybe 60 and 50 hertz, for example. And that could be done both ways also. In the mod center, we could affix the nameplate to the motor and ship it to him as he wanted it, or the customer may have the motor in inventory and they want it renameplated because they forgot, oh yes, to mention that their end user needed something different. So it can be in both places, but what you want to remember, or what you want to explain to the customer, is the agency marking on the motor. That means the UL and the CSA. That has to be done by license, by law, that has to be done at the manufacturer's facility of some kind. So if they need agency listing, the renameplate has to be done in the mod center where we can control it. If they don't care, you can do the mod simply by shipping a loose nameplate to them and have them attach it to the motor. The reason for that is the agency people say, how do I know that you're going to put that nameplate on the right motor? When I send it to you loose, you could put it on a Beldor motor. You could put it anywhere. You could stick it on the wall. So they won't allow you to put their markings on it when you ship it loose. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it does. So that's one thing. So the nameplate, when it's shipped loose, is shipped excluding the UL and CSA, and when it's done in a mod center, it includes the UL and CSA.
If you ship to a UL certified service station, can you have the markings on it, especially if you know loose nameplate?
Yes, you can. And we'll get to that one just in about 2 seconds too. But yes, you can. Some UL certified motor shops can do this for you. But then you have the trouble of sending the motor to them. Then they have to make up a nameplate because they don't have our logos and things. And it can be done that way, but it's usually quite a pain. It's much easier if we do it, but it can be done. Big red note, explosion-proof motors must be re-nameplated in mod center. Explosion-proof motors must be reworked in mod center. Or they have to, if the customer has the motor and he wants a mod, it's typical that he has to send the motor back to us or to an authorized shop and get it done. Can't be messing with an explosion-proof motor in the field. Very, very dangerous situation. And what happens is, if they or an end user messes with it, it's got our name on it. So if there's a fire, guess who they're going to call? So that's why be very careful with explosion proofs. Motor re-rates, yes or no? Now, we have a situation where the customer says, I have blah, blah, blah model in my inventory, and I buy it. It's special for me. It's proprietary to me. You make them for me all the time. Although, today I want to ship this motor to Botswana land, and they have 50 hertz in Botswana land. So I want you to send me a nameplate that has 50 hertz on it. Now, Botswana land could care less about UL and CSA. That's a North American thing. So they don't care that it doesn't have the agency, but they want it on there. So you go look or you go ask, can this motor for customer XYZ have this 50 hertz requirement that he wants? Sometimes it can, sometimes it's capable, sometimes it's not. They often request these rated differently for small quantities, short lead times. Somebody forgot to order the motor. A lot of reasons, okay? When we look in our database, or if you call engineering, you may have the nameplate request rejected. And then you throw up your hands and say, now what? Well, there's usually 3 main reasons that engineering will reject a renameplate. And those reasons are, there'll be a note in the database, or they'll tell you, no, you can't, it's too hot. They'll tell you it's too weak, or they'll tell you it's saturated. Those are the 3 main reasons why you can't do it. So I'm going to explain to you what that means, why engineering is saying that, and then what you should do about it. Hot means that the motor in question will exceed the temperature limits of the installation based on what you've asked it to do. Remember, motors will kill themselves if you ask them to. So if you want a renameplate and it says hot, that's not allowed, because the motor will try to do it and it'll burn up. Then we got another issue. When this happens, you have several options. You can go back to the customer and ask them to derate the horsepower. Suppose you have this was a 5 horsepower motor in Botswana land, and he wanted 5 horsepower 50 hertz. You asked engineering, and they said, it can't do 5 horsepower 50 hertz, but it can do 4. So you can ask him, is 4 acceptable? There's a reason. You can lower the service factor on the motor if it has one. Some motors have service factor that can be used as a trade-off. It's not the best situation, but it's a possibility. You could change the duty cycle. If it's a continuous duty motor, you could say, I can't give you that, but I can give you 60-minute duty, 30-minute duty, something like that. When all fails, the easiest thing to do for hot is to get the next bigger horsepower to start from. Just get a 7.5 horsepower to make this 5 that he wants. Okay, so the next bigger horsepower is usually the way to do this, if they won't accept the fact that we don't want to mark the motor what he's asking for it to be marked. You'll see other ones that say weak. Weak means the motor does not have enough torque, does not develop enough torque at the rating that you're asking for it. A typical example of this one would be you have a 230 460 volt motor in stock that's exactly what the customer needs, except he wants 200, 400 volts. Okay? If you put 200 volts on a 230 volt motor that's wound specifically for 230 volts, it's going to be weak. It doesn't have the voltage it wants. So it's like pouring gasoline, water in your gas tank. It's weak. It won't perform. It's not designed for that. Typically, the volts per hertz ratio is too low. That's what happens. So, the solution, again, the easiest solution is go to the next larger horsepower motor. Now, when we derate the volt per hertz for the larger motor and drop the horsepower back, it's almost the same situation as hot. And now the motor will have plenty of torque because it was designed to have more torque to start with. So, that's what you do with weak. Saturated is usually abbreviated as SAT, and SAT is the most difficult. It's the opposite of weak. In this case, they're asking the motor to do a higher volt per hertz ratio than it was designed for. We've talked about this in the past in other sessions. When you ask a motor to have a higher volt per hertz ratio than the iron that the coils are wound on is capable of doing, it will not run properly. It manifests itself in overheating, high amps, low efficiency, makes noise, not good. Saturated means, an example of saturated is, let's say you have a sponge and you are going to wet the sponge with water, okay? When you get enough water in the sponge and you add more, what happens? The water comes dripping out. That's because the sponge is saturated. That's what saturated means. So if you have too much volt per hertz ratio and the motor is saturated, it doesn't like that. That's basically what you have. There is no real, definite, easy solution to this problem. You can look at a different motor family, maybe look at a premium efficient or something like that. But usually it doesn't work. Going to the next bigger horsepower, in fact, makes it worse. It doesn't really help. So this saturated issue usually does not result in a mod. It results in a rewind. You have to rewind the motor for the voltage and frequency that you want, or a buildup. That's a very difficult mod when you get sat. Okay? Now we have our famous question session, and we will ask the first question, and who can be my victim? Who wants to be my victim today? We'll call on Kristen. Kristen? There's the question. Which of the following stock motors accept the brake in the form of a kit?
Black Max?
She says Black Max. Who agrees with that? We've got two agreed. And lo and behold, absolutely correct. Nicely done. The other motors do not have provisions for a brake, and the explosion proof you can't mess with anyway. So that's very good. Name yourself a victim. Danielle. The customer requests a mod because the conduit box on the motor needs to be in a different position than standard. What's the standard called? F1. Excellent job. Name a victim. My. Customer is asking for an encoder kit or mod on a Blue Max motor. What parameter are they looking to monitor? When you put an encoder on and you have a closed loop situation, you put the motor in cruise control. What parameter are they looking for? RPM, exactly correct. Very good. Adding thermostats to a motor wind, oh, you gotta name me a victim. Okay.
Okay.
Adding a thermostat to a motor winding on a mod or any other reason is intended to provide protection from what?
Overheating.
Overheating. Absolutely correct. That's what thermostats do. Victim. Danielle, what type of motor enclosure cannot accept a field-installed C-phase kit mod? C. Final answer, C. Explosion proof. You're getting the point. Name a victim. Kristen, if the requested nameplate mod is rejected due to the motor being weak, what's the next logical step? Call engineering to see if they'll change their mind, add some thermostats, or suggest the next larger horsepower? C. Very good. Suggest the next larger horsepower, then it won't be weak. Okay. That's all the questions we have. Attached to the end of the presentation is a glossary of terms for you to use for further review. And that's the end of the presentation today. So this is Max signing off. Until next time, have a good day.